My name is Kelsey Cooper, and today I will be discussing for my historical documentary project Christopher Columbus. I chose Christopher Columbus because we all have learned about him some point in our education, whether it be when we were in grade school or as we got older and we dove into more history classes. I know that for college I haven't really studied Christopher Columbus, so that's why I chose him. I chose him because he's a very interesting person and he is very um, important to the way that history is now. I believe that if Christopher Columbus wouldn't have discovered what he did discover, we may not have some of the materialistic things that we have now. We may not have some of the religious background that we know of now. The main focus of this documentary is to explain what really drove Christopher Columbus in his travels. After doing many research and reading his journals that were actually written by him, I noticed there was a lot of animosity about him looking for just gold, and the wealth and the materialistic things that came behind going on a new voyage and exploring worlds that we didn't know of or that nobody knew of yet. There was also a lot of religious content that he found, and God really seemed to drive him on his journey on the New World. He spoke with God and he accepted answers from God to help him on his journey, because there was times when he may have thought that he couldn't do it, or maybe that it was too treacherous of a journey for him to go on. He then goes to talk about in some of his journals the treatment of the Indians, and so I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about how the Indians were treated and what he did for them. And then I'll be going into a little bit about the religious content and pulling some quotes from some of the primary sources that I found, and also some of the books that I read on Christopher Columbus. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on Christopher Columbus, just so that we can kind of like dive into maybe a little bit about himself before he became a colonist and before he decided that he wanted to go on this journey. Christopher Columbus was born on October 31st, 1451. He was an Italian explorer, a navigator, and a colonist who went on a voyage in the Atlantic Ocean. Before that, he worked with his father, Domenico Colombo, at a cheese stand. So Christopher Columbus started off pretty much a nobody. He took up with his dad, and they worked together. So he had no real, I guess you could say, motivation to even travel when he was younger. He was in school, but he decided that he wanted to study a lot of scholarly books. And once he got older, after studying these scholarly books, he asked permission from the Catholic monarchs of Spain to fund his journey to travel the New World. He set sail in 1492, and he set sail on one ship specifically. It was called the Nina, and after a year of exploring, he returned with native captives. So that's where the Indians come in. He saved these Indians and brought them back with him so that they could escape from harsh treatment. Christopher Columbus died May 20th, 1506, at the age of 54 years old. So Christopher Columbus was very influential to the history that we have today. I believe that if he wouldn't have explored and found new things, we wouldn't have much of the things that we have now, like maybe some of the spices that we have, or some of the cotton and like fabrics and things like that. Um, Although his travels were very beneficial to history, they also brought diseases over, which may not have been the most beneficial thing, but all in all, his travels were very, very beneficial to the historic um, place that we have now. So I'm going to jump into the beginning of Christopher Columbus's journey. After receiving the okay from the Catholic monarch of Spain to explore the New World, Columbus set sail on a ship called the Nina. And this is where I will pull from a book that I read. It was by Hinckley, and it was A Man of the Great Gentiles. So he quotes, "A man among the Gentiles, Christopher Columbus was described as a strong religious person that wanted to explore to find himself in his faith. Throughout his voyage, he ran into a lot of hardships that made him realize how important his faith was." So Christopher Columbus was a Catholic believer, and he wasn't much into his religion until he went on his voyage. The Journal of Christopher Columbus that Christopher Columbus actually wrote himself was very captivating to me. It actually explained a lot of what happened on the journey, and so it made a mental picture in your head basically of maybe what the ships look like on the inside and what harsh conditions that they may have encountered while on this voyage. It also states in the journal that Christopher Columbus used nature and God as a way of showing him clues on where to navigate. So Hinckley describes that he used these things to motivate him, and he used his religion to answer questions that he may not have known on the time of his voyage. So the Journal of Christopher Columbus, I'm going to pull a little bit from that, a quote directly written from Christopher Columbus. It says, "The Journal of Christopher Columbus, he describes the nature and scenery." And this is the quote, "We had seen a great multitude of birds flying westward, that we hoped to see land that night, and therefore we pressed onward. A great cloud appeared in the north, which is a sign of proximity of land." So he used this nature, and he used this the birds that he said that God blessed him with. Further in the journal, he goes to explain that God blessed him with seeing these birds, and that the birds meant that they were close to land, or that they were going in the right direction. So I'm going to jump in now to the faith of Christopher Columbus. Even though we touched on it a little bit by Hinckley, I'm going to go into more detail. He was found to be a religious person before his journey started, but he noticed that he had to rely on God, that there was no other way that he was going to get through this journey unless he relied on God. I'm going to pull another quote from Hinckley in A Man Among the Gentiles. He not only relied on God to get him through the journey, he also was looked at as a god. Christopher Columbus didn't really like to be called a god. He wasn't looking for that recognition, but the Native American Indians looked at him as a god. And Hinckley expresses in his research and writing that Indians treated him like God because, and quote from Hinckley, treated the Indians like people and not animals. So Christopher Columbus, he treated them as if they were people and they weren't some animals that didn't know anything or were foreign to their land. He was looked at also as a biblical figure, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. It was Nymphi, and Nymphi was a figure in the Mormon religion who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. though Columbus was looked at as some sort of god, his journals also explain how he relied so much on the grace of God to get him through the journeys. Like I said before, I don't think that he would have made it in these conditions if it wasn't for God, and I don't think that Christopher Columbus would have been able to get through what he did. And he also explains that in his journals, that God was a very big part. It ensured his safety and his navigation. Um, Christopher Columbus became a devoted disciple, if you will, of God, and relied on him to keep him on the right path of the voyage of the New World. So religion was very big for him. He found different, even though he was Catholic, he found different, I guess you could say, branches of religion while he was on his voyage. He ran in, just like the Native American Indians. It was more of like a Catholic Mormon religion, and he really began to study each religion, but he relied on God a lot. So now I'm going to talk about the treatment of the Native American Indians. The Native American Indians were just a section of the people that Christopher Columbus met along the way on his voyage of the New World. He explored a lot, and he met a lot of people along the way, but Columbus noticed more of the harsh treatment of the Native American Indians. For example, the Indians were held captive, they were starved, they were beaten, they had things taken from them, their children were taken from them, they just suffered. And Christopher Columbus didn't look at them as different. He looked at them as people that could maybe introduce new religion, materialistic things like fabrics and different sorts of spices or flowers. I know that they used flowers, spices as a way to maybe cure diseases. So Christopher Columbus looked at this as a good thing. He looked at this as these people could teach them things and bring them new things. And so Christopher Columbus decided that he was going to bring them back as captives so that they could escape the harsh treatments that they had. He treated them like real people, and in his journal he states that I saw the worst treatment of the Indian people. I wouldn't even compare it to animals because it was much worse. I would compare it close to dung on the streets. So that actually was written by Christopher Columbus in his journal, and that explains a lot. It explains that he really wanted to help these people. So Christopher Columbus was a very forgiving, and he wanted to help people. And that was the main concern, I think, of his voyage, in my opinion, was that he wanted to find himself, and he wanted to find new religion, and he wanted to trust God, and he wanted to find, he may wanted to find, new things that he could bring over, but I think that his main concern was finding that religion and the grace of God to grant him with safety, and him bringing over the Native American people really helped history. I think the topic of Christopher Columbus is pretty important to learn because he was the basis for the abundance of information that formed on the basis of his evaluation of the New World. We may not have some of the things that we have today, like I said before, and so I think that is why it helps us to better understand the past, the present, and the future of the history that we have today. I learned a lot when I was researching Christopher Columbus, and I wish that we had longer to talk because I would go into more depth about that. But what I really found interesting was his devotion to relying on God for direction, because many people don't believe that there's people that don't have religious background, and he trusted in a person that he has never met, never seen. and the research I conducted for this historical documentary wasn't difficult. I really enjoyed actually diving into the journals that he wrote and the and the other books that I read about Christopher Columbus, and I actually really enjoyed researching him. Um, I have a couple of questions after doing research. If Christopher Columbus wouldn't have made his voyage, would someone else have attempted to? And I think that is a great question, and I'd really, like to figure out the answer to that. Um, but maybe if I conduct more research, that will become something that I can talk about um, and know about. So, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch my historical documentary on Christopher Columbus, and I hope you've learned a little of something that you may not have done before. Um, and I'm not technologically savvy, so I'm going to hold up my Works Cited. I tried to edit a video and it just did not work out for me. I spent almost 2 weeks doing it and I just couldn't figure it out. So I'm going to put my Works Cited up now, and thank you for watching.